Tonight, what I've got for you is a conversation with George Christensen. We had a conversation yesterday. We talked about the deplatforming against him. Big mistake from PayPal. Absolutely massive mistake. Now, I'm about to play this conversation with George. George is one of the few freedom senators that actually voted for our freedom on the jab over the last 2 years. He voted with Craig Kelly. And when it comes to the election, he fought really hard and was successful in helping getting Pauline Hanson elected to the Senate. He's an absolute legend. Big tech are coming after him. PayPal are coming after him. Give this conversation a share. He's a great guy. And let's watch this discussion together. It's about 45 minutes. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. I'll put some of your comments up here as well. And please, if you can support him, absolutely do so. There's 350 of you listening live. If you all give this a share, this will reach tens of thousands of people. Thank you guys so much. Let's have a listen, and I'll tune back in shortly. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here with George Christensen, the former member for Dawson. George, I want to welcome you to the show. Please, I want to start off by congratulating you on the win in Queensland, because that was everyone's win in Queensland that helped get Pauline Hanson elected to the Senate. I've still got my gin from her, and I want to congratulate One Nation as a whole for increasing their vote around the country.
Well, thanks very much for having me on your show, Joel, and thank you to Turning Point Australia for all the great work that you guys are doing for freedom, for liberty, for the nation. And mate, I haven't had a tipple of that gin yet, but save some for me.
It's actually quite nice. I had some on the podcast with my cousin Chad. It's a tropical pineapple flavor. It's very, very nice. Strongly recommend it. I'm so glad that Pauline's gone with an Australian-made company. It's excellent. George, you've had a bit of a rough week with censorship of a different form. I mean, it's one thing to worry about censorship happening with big tech and them censoring us off Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, but PayPal's come after you. And I'll give my audience some context. If you guys haven't heard about this yet, George was in the situation where essentially he got this message from PayPal, and this is what George wrote on his post. He posted this at the crack of dawn on Thursday morning. He said, "I was seeking funding for my Eureka Free Press News website project. We were well on the way to the $20,000 target with $2,500 donated in just 3 days, and suddenly PayPal permanently bans me. The www.eurekafreepress.com website has not even started. No content is up there. Apparently, there is a minority report-like monitoring system at PayPal that determines you're going to break their rules before you can actually do it." Wow. I will be speaking to PayPal in a few hours and try to resolve this. It'll be good to hear your thoughts on that, George. And PayPal coupled that with this message: "You can no longer use PayPal. After a review of your account activity, we've determined that you're in violation of PayPal's acceptable use policy. As a result, your account has been permanently limited and you won't be able to conduct any further business using PayPal. This is permanent under the PayPal user agreement sections, limited activities and actions we may take. Please remove all reference to PayPal from your website and or authorizations, including removing PayPal as a payment method, the PayPal logo, and the PayPal shopping cart." George, if you're as enraged as I was at seeing this, I was absolutely disgusted when I saw this. I thought that, it's bad enough we're getting smashed by censorship. How do you deal with this? And what were your conversations with PayPal after this?
Well, it's a combination of cancel culture meets big tech censorship. And look, I actually did try to contact PayPal, but it's one of these oligarchies, these monoliths, which you just can't find anyone to actually tell you something beyond what you already know. And so the only messages that I got back was, "Oh, you've been permanently limited," whatever that means. My access to PayPal permanently limited. I actually thought, well, I'll just test this out. And I used another email account to try and set up another PayPal account. And within minutes, there was a notice back that that one had been permanently limited. So, no violations that I saw. I went through their acceptable use policy, Joel, and I looked to see all of the kind of things that would get you pinged from being a PayPal user. And the kind of things obviously are engaging or using PayPal for illegal activity, promoting illegal activity. There was the sort of, the infamous lines of promoting hate speech or discrimination. There was a whole host of things, drug use, promotion of violence, all the rest of it. None of them I had actually fallen afoul of. None of them. There was a list of different business types that if you were involved in that, you had to get pre-approval to use Facebook. Not one of them had media or blogs or news websites or anything like that in it. Honestly, if I wanted to take Facebook to court now, I probably could, although perhaps somewhere in their terms and conditions is the get out of jail clause that basically says we've got the right to do whatever we want with you as a customer. So, mate, I was kicked off, and quite clearly it was because I was actually taking donations to set up a conservative, pro-freedom news site. So that's, as you've said, Eureka Free Press, www.eurekafreepress.com. There's the plug for the website to come. It's going to be a news aggregator with the difference that it'll have original news stories. So if you've seen the Drudge Report, populistpress.com, citizenfreepress.com, these are the kinds of websites that it's modelled off, basically combining the best of the best news and views for conservatives with a particular Australian focus, hence the flag and the title Eureka. And it's, as I said, it's going to be combined with some original story content. And the fundraising was going actually towards contracting a freelance journalist to write stories regularly for the site. It's not intended to make a profit. So there's nothing that I did that violated any rules. What PayPal has done is what they've done repeatedly, and that is censor conservative and independent media.
I think it's absolutely disgusting. And, this coupled with what's going on with censorship as well. This morning we got the news that Elon Musk was essentially going to be potentially dropping out of the deal with Twitter.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people are like, oh, that means he's got to pay the $1 billion. Not necessarily. Just to give you a bit of a legal background, I was listening to Tim Pool this morning on it. He said, look, yes and maybe no, not necessarily. He has to pay the $1 billion if he gets taken to court by Twitter and they say, we didn't violate the actual agreement at all. But Elon Musk might make the point that, hey, this deal based off $44 billion was actually based off a false premise. It's actually based off the fact that, we thought there were this many users, when in actuality, that's not the case at all. So it might be grounds to actually get a cheaper deal. Those that are financing Elon Musk, because it's not just him that's buying it, I think they may have come back to him and said, you know what, we might actually have a situation here where you could get it for cheaper because of this false premise that it was sold to you on. So I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to sell people hopium on this point, but the point must be made that we actually don't know fully the details on this actual point. And it is a good reminder, though, that a lot of people, they shouldn't put their faith in a savior to come and save them. But but at the same time, and you always echo these points too, George. But I think the same point must be made. I'm hoping that he still does go through this Twitter deal, because I truly believe that he's been absolutely shocked by what Twitter's been doing to people like Jordan Peterson, Dave Rubin in the last week about dead naming of Ellen Page, if you guys haven't heard about that. What's your thoughts on all that, George? Because not only have you now got the censorship of the payment providers where you're receiving donations from, but now you've also been putting up for a very long time now the censorship of big tech.
Yeah. Well, look, and I want to come back to the PayPal situation, because there's some lessons out of it. But let's just go to Elon Musk. Now, you're right. Elon's, not the white knight. We shouldn't expect Elon to be a savior. I'm not 100% on Elon. There's some stuff that he's involved in his business dealings that I reckon is a bit cracked, and that's the AI transhumanism stuff that he's pushed. But look, it may just be that Elon's had this great awakening, because he's seemed a little bit red-pilled lately with a few of the comments that he's making. So it's either an emergence of a new Elon or its front. I'm not sure, but I suspect there's probably a little bit of the former in it. And so he's really decided to go after Twitter on the basis of them not being a free speech platform, as Jack Dorsey, the founder of Twitter, said it would be when he launched it. And look, I think that he's been shocked about the kind of censorship that you're seeing with people that you've mentioned, like Jordan Peterson. It's been going on for a long time now on Twitter. And this, I think that you're right. I don't think he's going to get pinged for pulling out, but we're going to get pinged for him pulling out of the Twitter deal, because it's just going to mean that all of those left-wing censorious Marxists there at Twitter will just get trigger happy again with any conservative, because the threat of Elon Musk being their boss, who is now seemingly a champion of free speech, is no longer there. And as for the deal itself, well, Elon pulled out of this deal because they wouldn't show the receipts. He wanted to see the behind the scenes data with Twitter to ensure that it did have the numbers that it said it did, that there wasn't just a whole heap of bots that are on Twitter. And we know that there are a whole heap of bots on Twitter. And the greatest take that I read actually was from the Last Refuge blog. It's also called the Conservative Treehouse. And they said this: it appears that Twitter Inc. did not want to reveal how Jack's Magic Coffee Shop was able to sustain operations at an extremely high cost without making money. And I thought, yeah, that's really the nub of the problem for Elon. When you're going to spend 40 odd $billion on buying an outfit, you want to make sure that the customers are real, that the data is real, and that the thing's going to make a return. And here's the worrying thing: who actually owns Twitter right now? Like, who's in control of Twitter? And if the books can't be made public to someone that's going to purchase it, what do the books show? And I may strap on the tinfoil hat for a second, Joel, but we know that Twitter is just riddled with leftists, can I say, with probably some deep state operatives or lovers who just push out one certain message. The Twitter management basically drowns out the other message or censors it. And so you got to say, is Twitter really, is it about making money, or is Twitter about propaganda and promoting propaganda? Because the journalists are all over Twitter. And so the messages that get fired up on Twitter end up in mainstream media. So I think Elon's exposed actually more than what he thinks is exposed here.
Yeah, absolutely. And ever since he did start engaging with what was going on with this deal, and it's a very complicated deal, especially anyone that knows anything about mergers, takeovers, especially the hostile sorts of ones, sort of like this one, where all the employees are threatening to resign and get out of there. There's going to be an element of prodding from a guy like Elon. $44 billion, as you said, it's not nothing. It's not chump cheese. Now, when it comes to this particular deal, what's going on is I see that it's exposed a lot of things. I mean, the day after the deal was actually announced, there were people like Tim Pool. Tim Pool himself, he went up 100,000 followers, whereas other people, they went down hundreds or 10,000 followers. I think there was actually an audit done of Joe Biden's following, and it showed something like 50%. I think this was Breitbart that reported this. Something like 50% of his followers are fake. And it's like, a lot of us have been like, yeah. We knew it. A lot of people, a lot of mutual friends of ours, George, they encouraged me to be more active on Twitter. I'm like, guys, why? Why would I go to a battlefield where I know they're stacking the deck? I've known it for years that they're stacking the deck. Not only do they censor you and insulate you away from your conservative peers or peers that you agree with that have clicked follow on your profile, but you're actually, that it's such a cesspit, and the lefties... And the lefties are way stacked up there. The conservatives have a much more dominant presence on Facebook. If you go to Facebook and you see any of the recent COVID articles that are put up there, the top emoji is always the laugh emoji. People are always laughing at this clown show. And it's just a reality check that Twitter's not the real world, as Dave Rubin would say. I'm really excited to see. Yep.
Just say that back, and I forget the year, but there was a suicide of a young conservative activist by the name of Wilson Gavin, following a protest that he did against drag queen story time in Brisbane City Council Library, and he just got absolutely flamed on Twitter for that. He ended up taking his own life, and I remember saying to someone only months earlier that, the next time I hear about Twitter basically causing a suicide, I'm out. And I pulled the pin in it then, and I was glad that I did. Now I've gone back a bit gingerly. I'm not as active on it as I was before. I mean, before I loved just, getting stuck into the lefties, on Twitter. Now, that's not my mission. My mission is not to argue with the left. They can go and believe all the crap they want. My mission is to educate other people. So I'm back on there. My Twitter handle is @NationFirstAust, AUST, and I block very, very quickly anyone who is a left-wing troll. Anyway, if you want to join, I'm on there, but I just use it for a very different purpose, and that is pushing out the message that I want to. I agree, in terms of a battleground, it's rigged.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing how this deal pans out with Twitter, with Elon. A lot of people think, it's the death of it. We'll see. If it is, then so be it. Like, we're where we were before the deal. I mean, we still have nothing from the deal so far except what it's exposed so far. But I guess the big hope I had with Twitter is that if Elon came in and he highlighted a lot of the censorship that was going on, and he made it that it was actually appealing to both 50% of America, then it would actually force the other big social media players like Facebook and YouTube and to actually lift their standard and be like, crap, we're losing people to Twitter. We need to lift our game and tap into this other 50% of the market, which we're segmenting ourselves off from. So, but I guess we'll see what happens in the coming months.
Could I just go back, sorry to jump in, Joel, to the PayPal situation?
Yeah.
So the take on this is, beyond poor little me. I mean, I've been fine. As I said, I raised $2,500 before they took me off. I went and just got another provider, set up my own portal at www.georgechristensen.com.au /donate, and I've raised another $2,500 since Twitter banned me. So we're well on the way to achieving that $20,000 goal, to getting Eureka Free Press up and running. But for everyone else, this is a big problem. It should be illegal for PayPal to do what they've done, more so than it should be illegal for Twitter or YouTube or Google or Facebook to censor you on their platforms. And why? Because PayPal is a money provider. It is. It operates in Australia. It operates across the world, and it facilitates the transfer of money. Now, I don't think that any outfit that is involved in finance should be boycotting or banning certain people. Imagine if our banks decided to go down the track of telling people, well, look, I don't like your political views. We've seen a tweet that you've posted, or we've seen a Facebook post. We don't particularly like that. We don't like the kind of work that you do. And so we're withdrawing our services. You can no longer have a credit card. You can no longer have an FPOS card. You can no longer have transactional banking services with us. I mean, that would be outrageous, except that we have seen it already. We've seen it over in Canada when banks started freezing the accounts and shutting down the accounts of people that were backing the Truckers' Freedom Convoy in Canada. So this is a problem that is getting out of hand, and it needs to be nipped in the bud. Now, I don't expect that an Albanese Labor government will nip it in the bud. In fact, they'll probably only welcome it. But I expect that Peter Dutton and the Liberal National Coalition will look at this issue of big tech censorship, of cancel culture, of financial providers that are actually definancing people, removing them from what is right now an essential service for citizens and businesses alike, and fix that situation. I think if you want to operate as a financial provider in Australia, you must provide to everyone, unless of course it's illegal activity, but everyone else. Don't pick and choose.
Absolutely. And this isn't the first time you yourself and even Craig Kelly from the United Australia Party have tried to fight against censorship. I remember when Craig Kelly, back when he was an independent member of parliament in that weird period after he left the Liberal Party and was sort of partyless, between I think it was about February or March till about June last year in 2021, I think he was making plans to actually put forward a bill against censorship. Where did that end up going?
Mate, I did it.
So you did it. Sorry.
So Craig was Craig. I believe Craig seconded that bill, but I'm not 100% sure. Memory's a bit hazy about that. But I put forward the social media protecting Australians from censorship bill, which basically said it wouldn't have covered a PayPal situation, but it would have covered a situation on Twitter or on YouTube or on Facebook or any other major social media provider that the government deemed should fall into that. But those three were particularly named in the bill. And it said that for the purposes of political discussion, philosophical discussion, ideological discussion, cultural discussion, you could not censor someone, you could not limit them, you could not shadow ban them, you could not do a range of things that currently big tech actually do. And when we think about it, it's even more important in a country like Australia or anywhere outside the US. All of these companies are United States companies, they're foreign companies.
That's right.
They shouldn't be interfering in political discourse, ideological and philosophical discourse in other countries. It's actually a form of foreign interference when they do that. And so that's why you see in certain countries, I note it's happened in Russia, of course, it's happened in certain African countries where they've actually banned these platforms from being there, not because of what's on there, but because of their censorious nature. So, I think that's there's going to be a lesson in that for these big tech giants. But reality is that if we did it in Australia, I think they'd just thumb their nose at it. We could put up roadblocks, but anyone with a VPN could probably get around that. They do in those other countries that I mentioned. So what it's going to take is a return of Donald Trump to the presidency to actually be unleashed and tackle these big tech oligarchs for breaching the free speech provisions that's in the US Constitution, and it should apply all around the Western world.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really looking forward to seeing how that progresses. On the PayPal front and PayPal coming after you, I've actually, I'm so upset with this because I'm actually also with PayPal. I haven't had any problems with them at all so far. But when you build a channel, even going back to the days when I did the ARC back in late 2020, you start off knowing that they're going to come after you eventually, whether it's censorship, whether it's how you get donations. And that's why I've always relied on the donations of people that listen to the show. I am completely ready for PayPal to do the same to me because that's how I built it from the start. I've been talking to a lot of, ever since I saw your message in the middle of the night, George, 3 a.m. in the morning, I was like, okay, that's it. I need to talk to some providers, some Australian providers preferably, that can sort something out long term. So I am talking with people that are laying down the infrastructure for some of these financial services to replace what's been going on. Don't get me wrong, there's immediate things we can do right now, including direct bank transfers. And guys, if you want to support George, and I strongly encourage you to, because he's not building it for profit. George is building this so that we can all actually have a place where we can get some reliable information. So please do visit www.georgechristiansen.com.au/donate. He did have $2,500. I think we can add that back into his account just from this broadcast. The goal is $20,000 to help him build that infrastructure. I think that,
and it's going to be free, Joel. Like that website's not going to be on any paywall, no stories. It's just going to be a free service for people.
George, before I move on to the next topic, what else? What other projects are you doing? Ever since the election, you've been laying down a lot of amazing projects that you're doing with the Nation First project that you're working on under that brand. What other projects are you working on? Because you've got a lot of things. You're a busy guy. Tell my audience what's going on.
Well, there's only 3 things at the moment that I'm working on, but I've got a goal, but I just don't want to bite off more than I can chew at the moment. Obviously, money's not everything, but if you don't have the cash flow and the finance to actually lift your game, then you can't lift your game. So I'm working on 3 things at the moment. My main priority is the Nation First newsletter at nationfirst.substack.com. That's sort of taking up a fair bit of my time. I'm also continuing doing the Conservative One podcasts, which I make available through the Nation First newsletter. I've actually got an interview on Monday with Dr. Tyus Desmet, who's clinical psychologist from the University of Ghent in Belgium. He was the one who famously coined the term, or at least promoted the term, mass formation in response to how society reacted when the pandemic hit. So that's going to be an interesting interview, talking about his new book, The Psychology of Totalitarianism. He believes we're in the descent towards totalitarianism. And when we see things like banks and financial providers banning people because of their political ideology, we pretty much are on that descent. So that's also one of my focuses. And this Eureka Free Press is also going to be a focus, but I want to ensure that it's good before I hit the go button. I don't want a second-rate service, so I just need to crawl a bit before I walk there with that thing. Long term, mate, I reckon that what we need, and it doesn't necessarily have to be me that provides that, we need to recreate a version of Stephen Bannon's War Room here in Australia, where we unite all of the tribes, get good people like yourself and so many others, Cauldron Pool, the Good Source, there's a whole heap of people that are out there that are doing really good work in the conservative or pro-freedom, I should say, space, because I think that's a more important nominator now, pro-freedom, and get us all together and get us talking about the issues that matter, so we can educate other people on what to do, because people are looking for some sort of guidance at the moment, not necessarily looking for the white knight, but they know all the problems, or at least they know some of the problems. They're looking for solutions, and I think that if we can provide that in the long term, that'd be good.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people, they always say, oh, this is great, it's all talk and there's no action. Well, guys, you can't move on something unless everyone's on the same page. That's why we conservatives spend so much time on this. The reason why a lot of people, the reason why I spent so much time during the election following Julian, who was a candidate in my area for the UAP, was because it was educating people on how to actually run an election, how to fight an election. The left, unfortunately, they do it very, very well. If it's anything to do with the reins of power, they will fight tooth and nail for it. And that is something that we're playing catch up on, and that's why it's so important that we come together and we actually focus on getting on the same page and putting the ideas out there, seeing what the best idea is and running with it. And when someone puts their hand up, like George, with a great project like the Eureka project, we got to get his back. We've got to make sure that we've got his back, because we know what he's made of. We know how he's voted in the parliaments. We know exactly that he's put bills forward like the anti-censorship bill against big tech. He saw this stuff coming a mile off. And George, I don't know why you're still here. I really don't, because you've been warning people for so long, and I don't know how you don't get completely demoralized and leave the country, if I'm being honest.
Well, mate. Australia's always home. So, your home is where your heart is, and your heart's where your home is. And I love my country. I don't want to see it slide into totalitarianism, and I don't say that lightly. I mean, people might think that's a crazy statement to make. How can we be a totalitarian state when we're a democracy? Well, most totalitarian states began as democracies. They were still saying they were democracies when they were totalitarian states. I think it's a different form of totalitarianism that is the danger at the moment than what we think when we think of like places like Nazi Germany. It's more of a technocracy where the experts are going to rule. The globalists and the elites are going to be making all the money. And as Klaus Schwab and the WEF says, we're all going to own nothing, and apparently we'll be happy. So I don't want my country to be like that. And that's why there's still fire in my belly, even though I've left the parliamentary arena. As I said, you can't leave politics, mate. It's the duty of every patriotic citizen to be part of the political process, and I'm going to remain part of it until I take my final breath.
Awesome. I want to move on to someone who did take their final breath, unfortunately. Shinzo Abe, the former Prime Minister of Japan. We haven't had a serious assassination in some time on a global leader like this. A lot of people have heard about this story about Shinzo Abe. What's the context? Essentially, he was speaking at a political rally. The Japanese election for half of their upper house, so half of their sort of Senate, is actually in 3 days' time from the assassination when it happened. I think it's on the 10th of July, so tomorrow. And he runs this party called the Liberal Democrat Party, it's almost similar to the Australian Party, the Liberal Democrats. And I've got his rap sheet here. Who was Shinzo Abe? Well, essentially, some of the things that happened during his time, he's been characterized by a lot of things. From what I could see from a lot of the commentary around this, he was a nationalist. He was someone that wanted to really preserve the Japanese identity. He was someone who wanted to stop Japan from actually apologizing for the things that had happened in the past. He was an avid supporter of Donald Trump on the global scale. And, he's someone who pledged to stand by Taiwan and its existence. That's huge. Like, not even America sort of says that. He tried to put an end to treaties that restricted Japan's ability to rearm militarily, especially to oppose China. So he was a very strong man sort of guy. He was anti-globalist. He was completely against many of the European countries, especially. He was avidly against the communists, avidly against the World Economic Forum. He always had Trump's back. I think he was somewhat skeptical of the cause of the war in Ukraine, saying something along the lines of that Ukraine probably shouldn't have joined NATO as it would have increased tensions. And he also there are some big questions around economics. It was somewhat Keynesian style economics, I've been told by some economists. And
who isn't in the political world these days, unfortunately.
Exactly, we're all Keynesians now with $1 trillion of debt in Australia. But yeah, guys, honestly, I was really upset when I saw this. And the more I learn about this guy, the more I'm like, wow, this guy was a giant in Japanese politics. Yeah. Was he without scandal? No, not at all. But he was someone who did fight honorably for his country, for his interests, for his people, especially against foreign powers of all sorts. And I wish that our leaders in our country showed a tenth of the courage that this guy had, just to say that he's going to stand with Taiwan and stand against the World Economic Forum and the globalists and the communists. I mean, wow, what more could you want? No wonder, he stood by Trump. What are your thoughts on this, George?
Well, my thoughts are that it's a very strange situation. I mean, Japan is a country with a high level of gun control, and yet someone was able to craft together this rudimentary firearm and shoot at what seems to be near point blank range. The guy who was Prime Minister, the greatest leader of Japan post World War II, brought the country back to glory, I think, and also there's talk at the moment that he actually was still, while he was not prime minister, was still basically in charge of how things were running. And someone with that sort of history and legacy probably did have a great deal of influence still in Japanese politics. So how did this guy get so close to him? How was he able to do all of this and do it without police detection? It just seems very strange, and I'd be interested to see what they find out about this fellow. Was he just a lone wolf? I suppose it'll be the official story. Could he have been paid or in the cahoots of the Chinese Communist Party or other foreign agents, given that Abe had such a dominance over Japanese politics and policy, and it went against what a lot of the globalists and elites, particularly with the World Economic Forum, want to see. And there's a famous photo just to illustrate this. And I didn't know too much about Abe as well, except I sort of knew he was a good guy, but I didn't really know too deeply about what he actually did for Japan. There's a great photo that just shows who he was aligned to. And it's a photo that was taken at some globalist I can't remember whether it was the G20 or the G7, but here we go. Here's Trump and his envoy there with the Mo, and here's all of these European leaders. You can see there's Angela Merkel, who's gone, Mother Merkel, and there's Macron, sticking his French nose into it.
Theresa May as well. I think I can see her here.
Theresa May, that's her behind there. And the look is one of demand. We want you to do something, Trump. Trump's just like nonplussed. But have a look at the body language of Abe. Who's it mimicking? And who is he looking skeptical at? It's these European leaders, these globalists. So I think that photo shows you everything that you need to know about the attitude of Abe towards globalism and the elite, which the European powers basically are.
Yeah, I was really upset when I saw some of the things that was going on with the commentary as well. I mean, I think it was the I don't have it here on the screen, but I think one of the newspapers, I think it was NPR, reported just absolutely abhorrently on it. Yeah, NPR, former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, a divisive arch-conservative and one of his nation's most powerful, influential figures. I just thought, this guy's just died, like how can you do this? And he was revered, and he received, everyone around the world of all political spectrums, even in Australia. Even Dan Andrews put a statement out. Even all the leaders of Australia that had served had actually made the point. We our thoughts are with his family in the country of Japan. What we know about this shooting is the guy was from the Navy. I won't say his name because I think, like the Daily Wire, I think it's really bad to elevate and say the name of the person who's done this. It encourages it to happen again. But yeah, he sort of made this makeshift shotgun, double-barreled, and if you look at the footage of him being shot, and I'm not going to play it because I was really moved when I saw it. The first shot didn't look like it sort of hit him, and he was just like, what's going on? And he turns around, and then the second shot hits him, and he just sort of walked forward and collapsed. And it was just so... it was just gut wrenching to see that. I mean, read the rap sheet, guys. Rewind the video. You hear the guy was against everyone. It's very upsetting to see someone like this that served his country. He wasn't even running; like he was just sort of supporting his party. I compare this to if John Anderson was to be shot in Australia out of nowhere, just at a political rally. He was at a Liberal Party. He's sort of running for whichever person's running in the area. He's giving an endorsing speech, and then he just gets shot out of nowhere. I think after this, Japan's going to have a complete overhaul of security. I think it's crazy that he didn't have some serious Secret Service protecting him. The guy was so close when he shot him, and
that was nuts.
And I think people like Nigel Farage have made the point that the safety of politicians is something where we've got so many veterans that are living on the streets in in the Anglosphere, why can't they just be brought on board? I mean, we find, billions of what is it, $100 million to send over to Ukraine, just like that. How is it that we can't just do that we can hire the homeless that happen to be veterans, obviously after a psych eval's been done, and actually give them a job where they're employing their skills to protect the service of our nation. I mean, I don't understand how politicians could be against that. I mean, it's for their safety, right? George,
as long as we don't end up with what I see in other countries, where politicians are so remote from the people, surrounded by security details everywhere they go, in cars that have basically a detail entourage in front of them, that would not be healthy for democracy. So that's the danger. I mean, during the federal election, I was repeatedly receiving emails. I mean, every MP and senator was. It wasn't specifically for me, but repeatedly receiving emails saying that, high-profile candidates for public office need to ensure that they contact the AFP, that we're aware where they're going, who they're seeing. If there's a public event, that we have a presence there. And mate, I disregarded it because I don't know. Like, I have greater faith in the Australian people that we're not going to see an escalation of political violence like that. And when I did see it, I did attend a rally, and there were other sitting senators that were there, and MPs, and the police presence. You could see them, all the AFP guys with wires, out of the ear. I don't know. It just wasn't a good look. I thought that that's not the kind of thing that we want in Australian democracy. But obviously, if someone is going to assassinate someone, then we're going to see that. That's what it's going to revert to in this country as well.
Yeah, I really did. As we increase in population, it comes with new problems. In Australia, I've run into a number of politicians in person, and I've always noted the lack of security that they've had. I mean, I ran into, I'm not going to say who it was, but I ran into someone the other day, and you would be surprised that he was on his own. I was his day off, but you'd be surprised that he was on his own, with no one there. And I was like, I could literally go into the Kmart, buy a knife, and come back. It's really, I think that, we do live in a very good country because of that reason. I mean, it's amazing that we can do that. It's amazing that we can have a peaceful transfer of power from one party to another. I think we take a lot of these things for granted, and in order to keep it, we've got to remember, our values and our morals. But George, one of the really hilarious memories I have of Shinzo Abe is, I think it was 2018 or 2017. Shinzo Abe, and I forgot to mention this, he was the first leader that Trump visited, international leader, after the 2016 presidential election. He was the first one he went to. And I thought it was amazing because I think it was in this meeting or maybe another meeting where Trump was sort of, he was over there feeding the actual fish over in Japan. And the way the media reported it, they said Trump's, uncultured. He's tipped the whole box in there. What a buffhead. He has no idea what he's doing. And then little did people realize, it turns out that's exactly what Shinzo Abe did. So it was sort of, here's the fake news, and here's what actually happened. And I find this a really fond memory because it's like, no, guys. Shinzo Abe set the standard, and then Trump just followed suit, culturally. And I love that memory of him because it just shows that these guys, they had similar challenges. And I just think that, I'm disgusted by the fact that, even the media covering it now, that saying that, NPR, just completely being disgusting with their coverage and in calling him a divisive, arc conservative. I think that, the political discourse in this country, it's got to change.
What's NPR, National Public Radio, right? I think that's basically, it must have some taxpayer funding or some public funding somehow. So it's probably the American version of the ABC or SBS.
Right.
When you understand that, you understand why they're like that.
Sounds about right. Suckling off the public teat. But look, I'm curious to see how this election goes with Japan. I think it'll probably, sadly, crudely, it'll result in a surge of the vote for the Liberal Democrat Party. But it's like there's this massive hole that this has left. He wasn't super old, guys. Like, he wasn't like that. What was he, 67? He still had a lot of, I reckon he had at least 15, 20 years of being the statesman of the country. And it's going to be very difficult for the country to fill that gap. And there are forces that are trying to destroy Japan. Japan, is a country that it's the foremost place, one of our foremost allies. It's part of the Quad, right? He laid the groundwork for the Quad. And I was very upset to see this happen. And I do not want to see this kind of thing in our country. I think it would be terrible.
Japan, certainly under Abe's leadership, has been really, I guess you could call it, it stood out from the crowd in that it's just had this attitude as a major world democracy, a major world power, of Japan is for the Japanese. And I think Trump said it, and I'm probably going to paraphrase him a bit incorrectly here, but Trump said it so best that he said when he was pushing his America First policy, if every country around the world adopted our nation first policy, then the world would be a better place. And it would be, because nations can collectively make their people prosper. We can't get that from the United Nations. We can't get that from the World Economic Forum. But we can have individual countries setting an agenda out, an economic agenda, that helps lift the prospects and the fortunes of each and every one of their citizens. I think that Abe did that clearly in Japan. And what the bright side, as you've just said, there's going to be a surge in support towards his party this coming election, but more so, he will go down as almost like a martyr. He will become the equivalent of a Japanese saint, and I suspect that his political philosophy will grow in support as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm very curious to see if what's a stronger way to sort of send a message about your ideology than being a martyr. I think it was Charlie Kirk that made he posed the question, did the Chinese Communist Party know anything about this? Not that he had any evidence to suggest so, but I'd be very curious to see what happened. As we know so far, the gunman that did this, he used a double-barreled makeshift shotgun. So all the laws in the world, they couldn't have stopped this. Maybe a good guy with a gun could have stopped this, maybe. But, who knows? We could speculate till the cows come home. But he was formerly of the Navy in Japan. As we learn more about this gunman, it'll be very interesting to hear if there was a more sinister plot or if there was just a lone gunman situation. But George, I want to wrap it up there, and I want to make sure I send people to your website because you're doing some phenomenal work. If you guys want to follow George Christensen, click follow on his Facebook page. I'll be tagging him here. And please go subscribe and donate if you can to his website at the Eureka Free Press. I'll bring that up right now. He's got a lot of content which is coming out very soon, and I think that you guys are going to really love it, especially when you see what he's got in store with the Eureka Free Press project. And if you really want to donate to help him get past that $2,500 that he's been set back by PayPal, go to www.georgechristensen.com.au/donate. Nice and easy for you. George, thank you so much for your time. Do you have anything left to leave my audience with?
Mate, I think that all I want to say is, again, well done to Turning Point Australia for all the work that you are doing. And guys, let's keep up the fight for freedom.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, George. Cheers. We're back. I hope you guys really enjoyed that discussion. I'm looking to have more discussions with George and a number of others over the coming weeks and months. And look, it was pretty big there. Just something in the comments that I was reading there, really interesting fact about Shinzo Abe. I won't say the word, but you know, ivy that some people use to treat COVID. Well, that was something that Shinzo Abe's chief health officer over there actually encouraged people to take across the whole country. So I don't know if people actually did, but it was something that their chief health officer actually had the freedom to actually say. And I think that says a lot about him, his leadership, and what that inspired in people. If you want to support George, and this is the really good news, it was $2,500 that PayPal basically eliminated when George raised that on their platform. Well, the good news is that George has actually matched that and far exceeded that, and he's already a third of the way to 20,000 for his funding goal. He's a third of the way there now. So that's the really good news, and I really want to help support George and what he's doing. I think he's doing a phenomenal job. Turning Point and you know, the operation I'm running here, we do receive a lot of donations through PayPal. It's one of the places we do get, and it's something. When I saw this story about George, I was really upset by it. I thought that, you know, it's absolutely ridiculous that, you know, they're censoring him, and I strongly encourage you all to actually go support him. We do still receive payments from PayPal, but we have plans to phase off it. We're talking with a number of providers that are going to allow us to phase and wean our way off it. But if you do want to support what we're doing, click the link in the description, donate to Turning Point Australia. The link's also here as well. As I said, I want to get rid of these guys, and we're laying down plans to leave PayPal on our own terms. But when it comes to the actual path going forward, if you want to support George as well, click the link in the description and subscribe to his mailing list as well. Give this a share. There's hundreds of you listening right now, over 200 of you listening right now. Thank you so much. You're absolute legends. I've got plenty more content coming up this week. Stay safe, especially of those of you that are really copping it with the rain. And I can't wait to see you guys later. Ciao.